In the vastness of the universe, there were places where no one cared. A planet, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy, held a secret that no one knew about, or perhaps no one wanted to know. This was the home of the Forgotten Ones. Their world was once vibrant with life, but now it was a place of silence, abandoned and left to fade into the shadows of history. The beings who lived there had become little more than a memory. The beings on this world weren't human, but they were not too different. They had their own culture, their own history, and their own ways of life. But all that changed when their creators, an advanced race from the farthest reaches of space, decided they were no longer needed. The creators left without a word, taking everything they had given: the technology, the knowledge, the support, and leaving the Forgotten Ones behind with nothing. For generations, the inhabitants of this planet struggled to survive. They built new homes from scraps of old technology, trying to make a life in a world that had once been thriving. But over time, things got worse. The resources they depended on began to run out. Their once proud cities crumbled, and their fields, once full of crops, turned barren. The air they breathed became toxic, and their oceans began to dry up. Every day, it seemed as if the planet itself was turning against them. Yet the Forgotten Ones did not give up. They fought to survive. They searched for ways to fix their dying world, to restore what had been lost. But it was becoming clear there was no way out. They were alone, abandoned, and they could only watch as their world slipped further into ruin. Their hope was dying, and they had no one to turn to. No one cared. Until one day, something strange happened. In the silence of space, far away from their home, a signal was sent. It was weak, almost too faint to detect. But it was a signal nonetheless. It was a cry for help. A call that echoed through the stars, reaching the ears of those who still had the technology to hear it. The Forgotten Ones had not given up. They were reaching out, trying to make contact with anyone who might listen. This signal, though faint, was heard by humanity. It was picked up by scientists on Earth, who had been scanning the stars for any unusual transmissions. At first, they thought it was just another glitch, another random noise from space. But as they focused their attention on it, they realized something shocking. The signal wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone, something, was sending it. The message was simple, but it carried a weight that would change everything. Help us. The scientists were stunned. They had been prepared for many things, but never for this. The signal was coming from a far-off corner of the galaxy, from a planet no one had ever heard of. But it was not the message itself that caught their attention. It was the urgency in it. The beings who had sent the signal were desperate. They needed help, and fast. Back on Earth, world leaders were informed. There was confusion, fear, and uncertainty. Who were these beings? What did they want? Could they trust them? The questions were endless, but one thing was clear. Humanity had a choice to make. They could ignore the signal, forget about the Forgotten Ones, and continue with their lives as if nothing had happened. Or they could choose to respond. The debate was fierce. Some argued that helping these unknown beings was too risky. After all, they had no idea who or what they were dealing with. Others believed it was humanity's responsibility to help, to reach out to those in need, no matter the cost. The world was divided, but in the end, one thing was decided. A team of scientists, engineers, and diplomats would be sent to investigate. But even as preparations were made, the Forgotten Ones were growing weaker. They had no more time. Their planet was dying. The signal they had sent was their last hope. It was a desperate attempt to save their species, to save everything they had once known. But the truth was, they were not certain that anyone would answer. They had been abandoned for so long. Who would care now? As the humans prepared to embark on their journey, a strange sense of anticipation filled the air. Something bigger was at stake. The fate of an entire species hung in the balance. The team knew this was not just a scientific mission. It was a test of humanity's compassion, a test of whether Earth would stand by the Forgotten Ones or turn its back on them. Far across the galaxy, on a dying planet, the Forgotten Ones waited. Their hope was fading, but the faintest glimmer of it remained. They knew that even if help never came, they had done all they could. They had reached out, and for the first time in so long, they had been heard. But who would answer their call? And what would happen when the humans arrived? No one could be sure. The only thing that was certain was that nothing would ever be the same again. The faint hum of the mysterious signal echoed through the vast expanse of space, making its way toward Earth. For years, humanity had been scanning the stars, looking for signs of life, but nothing like this had ever come through. The signal was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was deliberate, full of urgency, as if it had been sent by a species desperate for help. The discovery was made in a small research facility in the middle of a quiet night. Dr. Elena Morris, a scientist specializing in extraterrestrial communications, was the first to catch the signal. At first, she thought it was just another interference, a glitch in the system. But as she analyzed it further, she realized something extraordinary. The signal was real, and it was not random. "Help us," the message repeated. It was short, simple, but powerful. No one had expected this. No one could have predicted that after all these years of looking into the darkness of space, they would find someone asking for help. The news spread quickly, and within hours, the world's leaders and the most brilliant minds on Earth were gathered. The question on everyone's mind was the same: who was out there? A small group of scientists was quickly assembled to track the origin of the signal. They worked day and night, using the most advanced technology available. The planet that the signal came from was far away, beyond the reach of any human ship. It was located in a distant corner of the galaxy, in an area where no human had ever ventured. The coordinates led to a planet known only as Crydor, a world that appeared on no maps. As the scientists continued their work, they learned that the signal was not just a cry for help, it was a plea from a dying world. The Forgotten Ones, a species that had long been abandoned by their creators, were reaching out in desperation. Their planet was falling apart. Their resources had been drained. The air was becoming unbreathable, and their food was scarce. They were running out of time. But who were these beings? What had happened to them? The team's questions only grew deeper as they dug into the signal's contents. There were no images, no sounds, just the words, "Help us." But there was something unsettling about the message. Despite their advanced technology, no one had ever encountered these beings. They were not from Earth or any known galaxy. The message itself was the first contact. This raised an even bigger question. Could humanity trust them? What if it was a trap, a trick designed to lure Earth into something dangerous? The possibilities were endless. Yet despite the fear, there was something else in the message, a sense of urgency, of true desperation, that tugged at the hearts of those who listened. The decision was made. A team would be sent, not just to investigate, but to see if there was any way to help these forgotten beings. The mission was risky, dangerous, and no one knew what to expect. But humanity couldn't ignore it. The signal had been heard, and now they had to respond. Dr. Elena Morris was chosen to lead the mission. She was excited but filled with doubt, torn between her scientific curiosity and the heavy weight of responsibility. She knew that if this was real, if the signal truly came from a species in need, Earth would have to make a choice that could change everything. Could humanity stand up and help those in need, even if it meant facing the unknown? With a team of experts, a spaceship designed for deep space exploration, and enough supplies to last them a long journey, the crew set out for Crydor. The journey was long and filled with uncertainty. As the ship traveled through the vast reaches of space, the crew spent their time studying the signal, trying to decipher any hidden meaning. But the signal remained the same: help us. For the crew, it was more than just a message. It was a mystery, a puzzle that needed to be solved. But with every passing hour, their questions multiplied. Were these beings truly helpless, or was there something more they weren't revealing? And what would happen when they finally arrived? Back on Earth, the world watched as the crew moved closer to their destination. The government kept their mission under wraps, but there was an unease in the air. No one knew what they would find when they arrived, or if they would even survive. But the hope was that, just maybe, this was a chance to make a difference. A chance to stand with those who had been forgotten for too long. As the ship approached Krydor, the crew felt the weight of the moment. This was it, the point of no return. They were about to meet the Forgotten Ones. But would they find allies, or would they encounter something far darker than anyone could imagine? The silence of space seemed to stretch on forever as the crew braced for what was to come. But the question lingered in every mind. What would they find on the dying planet of Krydor? The vast blackness of space seemed endless as the crew of the spaceship Vanguard made their approach to the planet Krydor. Tensions ran high aboard the ship. Everyone was on edge, knowing that they were about to make history. This wasn't just another scientific expedition. This was first contact with a species no one had ever heard of, a species that had sent out a cry for help, a desperate plea from the Forgotten Ones. As they entered the atmosphere of Krydor, the planet looked barren, with cracked land stretching out as far as the eye could see. There were no signs of civilization, no towering cities or signs of life, just the desolation of a world on the brink of collapse. The atmosphere was thick with dust, and the once blue skies were now a murky brown. The conditions were harsh, almost as if the planet itself was trying to hold on, but slowly fading. The crew had been preparing for this moment for weeks. They had rehearsed what they would say, what they would do, but no one could truly know what to expect. They had studied everything they could about Krydor, but the signal had given them little to go on. No one knew what the Forgotten Ones looked like, how they communicated, or if they would even be willing to trust humans. Dr. Elena Morris, the leader of the mission, stood at the front of the ship, looking out at the desolate landscape. She felt the weight of the moment press down on her. This was a moment that would define humanity's future. They were about to encounter something no one had ever imagined. "Prepare to land," Elena said, her voice steady, though her hands were slightly trembling. "Everyone, take your positions. This is it." The ship's engines roared as it descended toward the surface. The crew braced themselves as the ground approached, the ship shaking under the stress of re-entry. The tension in the air was palpable. No one spoke. It was as though they were all holding their breath, waiting for the moment when they would step out into the unknown. Finally, the ship touched down with a soft thud. The doors of the spacecraft opened, and the crew stepped out onto the surface of Krydor. The air was dry and bitter, a harsh wind blowing dust into their faces. It felt like stepping onto the surface of a dead world. There was no sign of life, no indication that anyone was there to greet them. For a moment, the crew stood in silence, staring at the vast emptiness before them. Then, a voice broke the stillness. "We knew you would come." The voice was soft but clear, and it seemed to come from nowhere, echoing through the dusty wind. Elena's heart skipped a beat. It was the first words spoken to them by the Forgotten Ones. Who are you?" Elena called out, trying to sound calm, though she felt a chill run down her spine. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a being unlike anything they had ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, but with pale, almost translucent skin. Its eyes were wide and dark, filled with an ancient sorrow that seemed to pierce through to the soul. It was tall and thin, and though its appearance was strange, there was something profoundly human about its expression. A deep sadness, a weariness, like a creature who had been abandoned and forgotten by the universe itself. "We are the lost," the figure said, "the forgotten. Our creators left us here, and now we are dying. You are our last hope." The crew stood in shock, unable to fully comprehend what they were seeing. The being's voice carried a sadness that made it hard to breathe, as if it was not just talking about a planet dying, but about its entire species, the last remnants of a once thriving civilization, now brought to the edge of extinction. The leader of the group, Captain Alex Carter, stepped forward cautiously, trying to maintain control of the situation. What happened to your creators? Why did they leave you here? The being's expression darkened. They made us. They gave us life, knowledge, and power. But when we were no longer useful to them, they abandoned us. We became expendable. Now we are all that remains of what once was. The truth hit the crew like a wave. These beings, the forgotten ones, had been nothing more than tools to their creators. They were left behind to perish when they were no longer needed. The sense of abandonment was overwhelming, and for the first time, the crew began to understand the gravity of the situation. We cannot survive here much longer, the being continued. Our planet is dying. The air will become toxic in days. Our cities are falling apart. We need your help, or we will vanish like dust in the wind. Alina's heart ached for them. She had never imagined anything like this. The message they had received, the plea for help, it was all real. These beings were in need, and it was clear now that they were not enemies, not invaders. They were survivors, clinging to the last remnants of hope. But the crew had questions, so many questions. How could they help? What could humanity offer a species so far advanced yet so broken? How can we help you? Alina asked, her voice steady but full of empathy. The being looked at her, its dark eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. We need your technology, your resources, your strength. We need your help to rebuild, to survive. But you must be quick. Time is running out for us. And for you. The weight of the situation hit them all at once. The forgotten ones were not just asking for help, they were warning them. If they didn't act fast, it wouldn't just be the forgotten ones who would perish. The planet's dying state could affect Earth itself. The crew had no time to waste. The first contact had been made. But what came next? Would humanity be able to rise to the challenge? Or would they, too, be lost, forgotten like so many before them? The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air as the crew of the Vanguard gathered around the mysterious being who had introduced itself as one of the forgotten ones. The planet, Krydor, was dying, and the plea for help was not just a cry of desperation. It was a race against time. But as the crew began to explore the ruins of this once thriving civilization, they began to uncover something even darker, something that no one could have anticipated. The being, whom they learned was called Aaron, led them to an ancient structure, a grand building that had once been a center of knowledge and power for the forgotten ones. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and technology that seemed far beyond anything humanity had ever created lay scattered throughout the ruined hallways. But it was clear, whatever this place had once been, it was now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. "This was our home," Aaron said, his voice soft, tinged with regret. "The heart of our civilization. But it's all gone now. Our creators, they built us for a purpose. We were never meant to survive alone." Dr. Alina Morris, always the curious scientist, moved cautiously through the building, examining the advanced technology around her. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the strange energy sources, the devices that hummed with power even though they appeared centuries old. "What happened here?" Alina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aaron hesitated, his eyes distant as if the memories were too painful to relive. "Our creators. They were powerful beings, far beyond anything you can imagine. They gave us life, but we were never their equals. They used us, studied us, and when they were finished, they discarded us, left us to die on this world." Alina exchanged a glance with Captain Alex Carter. There was something troubling about Aaron's words. It sounded like these beings had been more than just abandoned. They had been experimented on. But why? What had happened to them after they were left behind? The crew had more questions than answers. Aaron led them deeper into the building, to a vast chamber at its core. In the center stood a massive machine, pulsating with energy. Its design was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, an intricate alien structure that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. Aaron stopped in front of it and turned to face the crew. "This is the Nexus," Aaron explained. "Our creators used it to control us, to study us. It was meant to be our greatest achievement, but instead, it became our prison." Alina stepped closer, studying the machine. "What does it do?" Aaron's expression darkened. "It was meant to be a tool for evolution. Our creators believed that by manipulating our biology with this device, they could create the perfect being. But in doing so, they stripped us of our freedom. They changed us in ways we could not control." "Changed you how?" Captain Carter asked, his voice skeptical. Aaron's gaze shifted toward the machine, and a flicker of pain crossed his face. "We were engineered, altered. Our minds, our bodies, everything about us was designed to serve them. But we rebelled, and when we did, they abandoned us. We became expendable. This machine was the key to their control, and when they left, it was left behind to keep us in check." "But how do we destroy it?" Captain Carter asked, his voice firm. Aaron's eyes flickered with a mix of hope and fear. "The Nexus can only be destroyed by combining your technology with ours. You must connect your systems to ours. Find a way to break its hold over us. But be warned, it won't be easy. The Nexus is a sentient machine. It will fight back. And if we fail, we may all perish." The weight of the mission became clearer than ever. It wasn't just about helping a species survive. It was about freeing them from the shackles of a cruel system they had no control over. And in doing so, humanity might just be facing the greatest challenge of all, a battle not just for survival, but for freedom. Alina and the crew knew they had no choice. If they didn't act, both the Forgotten Ones and humanity itself, the stakes had never been higher. The crew of the Vanguard now found themselves on a mission far more dangerous than any they had ever imagined. The Nexus, a sentient machine designed to control and manipulate the Forgotten Ones, had to be destroyed. But this wouldn't be a simple task. The Nexus was alive, aware, and it wouldn't let them break its hold over the Forgotten Ones without a fight. As the crew prepared for the mission, Alina and Captain Carter gathered their team in the ship's command center. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew what was at stake. If they failed, not only would the Forgotten Ones remain enslaved, but Crydor itself could fall, and with it, any hope of saving them. Aaron, who had led them this far, now stood by their side, his expression grim. He had made it clear that the Nexus could only be defeated with a combination of their technology and the Forgotten One's own hidden knowledge. But even he wasn't sure what would happen once they reached the heart of the machine. "We are close," Aaron said, his voice low. "The Nexus is located beneath the surface, in a chamber sealed away for centuries. Once we enter, there will be no turning back." Alina nodded, trying to remain calm. "Then we prepare ourselves. We can't afford any mistakes." The plan was simple in theory: infiltrate the Nexus, use their technology to interface with the machine, and shut it down from within. But Alina knew that simple in theory was often far from reality. She had no idea how they would fight a machine that could control minds, that could anticipate every move they made. As they descended into the heart of Crydor, the crew's nerves began to fray. The air grew colder as they neared the Nexus, and a strange energy seemed to pulse through the ground, like the planet itself was alive, aware of their every step. There was an unsettling hum in the air, as though the Nexus was waiting for them, watching, calculating. They reached the entrance to the Nexus chamber, an enormous door made of a material that defied all understanding. It shimmered in the dim light, a mix of alien metals and energy fields that no human had ever encountered. Aaron stepped forward, placing his hand against the door, and the surface rippled like water, parting to reveal the inner sanctum. Inside, the room was vast, filled with strange, floating structures and lights that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly glow. In the center of the room stood the Nexus itself, an enormous spherical machine, its core glowing with a malevolent energy. Its surface shifted like a living being, and from within, they could hear faint whispers, voices from every corner of the chamber. "The Nexus is alive," Elena whispered. "It's not just a machine. It's more like a mind, a consciousness. And it knows we're here." Aaron's voice trembled slightly. "It has been waiting for this moment. It knew you would come. It knew you would try to destroy it. But it is powerful, and it will not go down without a fight." Before they could take another step, the ground beneath them trembled. The lights flickered, and the air seemed to grow thick with static. Then the voice of the Nexus, low and menacing, filled the room. "Why do you resist?" The voice boomed, echoing through the chamber. "You cannot defeat me. I am the will of Crydor. I am its protector, its savior. I have kept this world alive when it had no hope. You are nothing. You are weak. You cannot destroy me." The crew stood frozen for a moment, the voice reverberating in their minds. It wasn't just speaking to them, it was speaking through them, as if it had already infiltrated their thoughts. "You cannot free them," the Nexus continued, its voice like a snake slithering into their ears. "The Forgotten Ones are mine. Their minds are bound to me. I control them. You cannot undo what has been done." Elena's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain focused. "We won't let you keep them trapped." A sharp, mechanical laugh echoed from the machine. "You are too late. The Forgotten Ones have already been changed. They cannot escape me. They will never be free." Before the crew could react, a blinding flash of light erupted from the Nexus. The room shook violently, and the crew was thrown to the ground. The lights in the chamber flickered, and the air became thick with energy. The Nexus had activated, and it was fighting back. Aaron collapsed to the ground, his body twitching as if he were under some unseen force. "It's trying to take control of us," he gasped. "It's using the same technology it used to control us. It's trying to force us into submission." The silence that fell after the destruction of the Nexus was deafening. The once constant hum of the machine, its oppressive grip on the Forgotten Ones, was gone. But in its absence, a new reality was beginning to settle in. The crew of the Vanguard had succeeded in destroying the Nexus, but they had only scratched the surface of the true challenges facing the Forgotten Ones. Elena stood amidst the ruins of the Nexus chamber, the air still heavy with the remnants of the machine's energy. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline still rushing through her veins. It was hard to grasp the magnitude of what had just happened. They had broken the chains that had bound an entire species for centuries, but now they were free, without a plan, without any knowledge of how to survive. Aaron stood beside her, his pale face filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. The weight of freedom was not as simple as it seemed. "It's over," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Nexus is destroyed." Aaron nodded slowly, but his eyes were distant. "Yes, but the damage it caused cannot be undone in an instant. We have been living in its shadow for so long. I'm not sure we even know how to live without it." Captain Carter and the rest of the crew gathered around, their expressions somber. They knew that while the battle had been won, the real struggle was just beginning. "We freed them," Carter said, his voice steady but full of uncertainty. "But we can't just leave them here to die. They're still on a dying planet. They still need our help." Elena nodded, her mind racing. They had come to Crydor to offer a simple act of compassion, to help a species that had been abandoned, to give them a chance to survive. But now they were faced with a much bigger question. How? Aaron spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "The planet is dying. The air is toxic, the soil is barren. The water sources are contaminated. Even if we rebuild our society, we cannot survive here for long. It's not just the Nexus that killed us, it's the planet itself." Elena felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. She had hoped that by freeing the Forgotten Ones, they could find a way to rebuild their lives. But the harsh reality was that the very world they lived on was beyond saving. "What do we do now?" she asked, turning to Aaron. The alien's dark eyes met hers, filled with uncertainty. "We don't know. We had hoped that the Nexus would provide a solution, but now we have to start over. The creators never gave us the knowledge to survive on our own. They gave us the means to be used, but never the means to thrive." There was a long pause. The crew exchanged glances, their faces drawn with the weight of their decision. They had come here with hope, with the belief that they could help these beings. But now, they were faced with a monumental challenge, to help them rebuild not just their society, but their future. The Forgotten Ones needed more than aid. They needed a new beginning. Captain Carter stepped forward, determination in his eyes. "We can't leave them like this. We'll help you. We'll find a way. Humanity won't abandon you." Aaron looked at him, his expression softening. "I don't know how you can help us, but I will trust you. You have already done what we never thought possible. Maybe you can show us how to live again." Alina glanced at her crew. They had just faced the unimaginable and survived, and now they were faced with the impossible, to help an entire species rebuild not only their way of life, but their very survival. The Forgotten Ones had been abandoned by their creators, but humanity had a chance to rewrite that history. They had a chance to help them thrive. "We have to act fast," Alina said. "The longer we wait, the harder it will be to save them. We need to start gathering resources, studying the planet, and finding ways to make it habitable again. But we also need to keep the Forgotten Ones involved. This isn't something we can do alone. They need to help us understand how their technology works, how they lived before the Nexus controlled them." Captain Carter nodded. "We'll do everything we can. We'll find a way to fix this together." As the crew began to organize, Aaron turned to Alina, his voice softer now. "I never thought I'd see the day when I would be free. I didn't know what it meant to be free, but now that I do, I realize that it's not just about surviving. It's about living. It's about choice, and we finally have that." Alina smiled, though the burden of what lay ahead weighed heavily on her. "We'll help you build something better. We'll show you how to live again. Together." The days following the destruction of the Nexus were filled with frantic activity. The crew of the Vanguard and the Forgotten Ones worked tirelessly together, building the foundation for a new society. Humanity had promised to help, and they did, offering knowledge, resources, and hope to a people who had lived in the shadow of despair for centuries. But even as they labored under the harsh sun of Krydor, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet of the planet, once oppressive, now seemed full of hidden whispers, of a presence just beyond the edge of her perception. It was the kind of sensation one gets when they know, deep down, that something is waiting, lurking just out of sight. One morning, as Alina was working with Aaron to help the Forgotten Ones adapt their technology to more sustainable uses, a sudden alert from the Vanguard broke through the routine. The voice of Lieutenant Marcus echoed through the comm system, tense with urgency. "Alina, Captain, you need to get to the ship. Now, we've got something big coming in from deep space. It's headed straight for us." A cold shiver ran down Alina's spine. She quickly exchanged a glance with Aaron, who seemed to sense her unease. "I'll be there right away," Alina responded, her voice tight with concern. Something's not right. When they arrived at the ship, the crew had already gathered in the command center, looking up at the holographic display that tracked the incoming object. It was enormous, too large to be a simple ship. Its shape was difficult to discern, as it was cloaked by strange energy readings that scrambled all attempts to identify it. It wasn't like anything the crew had ever encountered. Captain Carter's voice was calm but firm. "What are we dealing with?" Lieutenant Marcus turned to him, his face pale. "We don't know. Whatever it is, it's coming in fast, and it's on a direct course for Krydor. It's too big to be a meteor. And the energy signatures, it's not any kind of ship we've ever seen. It's almost like it's alive." A heavy silence filled the room as the crew absorbed the weight of Marcus's words. Alina's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. There was something unnatural about the object, something too deliberate about its path. It was coming for them, and it was coming fast. Aaron stepped forward, his expression clouded with fear. "This is no ordinary ship. I've seen something like this before. In the ruins, in the Nexus, the creators. They left something behind. They were always watching us, manipulating us, and now I fear they are coming back to finish what they started." Captain Carter's voice was sharp. "The creators? You're saying they're still out there?" Aaron nodded slowly, his voice low. "I don't know for certain, but I've seen remnants of their technology buried deep within the ruins. There are markings, symbols. They point to one thing. They were never truly gone. They've been waiting, watching." The realization hit the crew like a wave. The creators hadn't abandoned the forgotten ones. They had left behind something far worse. A sentient force, possibly an army or a weapon, that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. "They've been tracking us," Alina murmured. "Since the beginning. They knew we would destroy the Nexus. They knew we would free the forgotten ones. And now they're coming for us." The crew exchanged worried glances. It was becoming clear that their victory had triggered something much larger than they had imagined. The forgotten ones had been abandoned, but not because they were unimportant, because they had been part of a much bigger plan, one that had yet to unfold. "We need to prepare for impact," Captain Carter said, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed the uncertainty that gnawed at him. "Elena, Aaron, get to the surface and make sure the forgotten ones are ready for whatever's coming. Marcus, start analyzing the incoming object. Figure out what we're dealing with." Elena nodded, but she could feel the weight of the task ahead of her. They were on the verge of facing something far worse than the Nexus. The creators, whoever they were, had never truly left. They had simply bided their time. Aaron turned to Elena as they made their way to the surface. "We can't fight what's coming. Not alone. The forgotten ones, if they are to have a future, they will need to stand beside humanity. Together, we have a chance. But it's not going to be easy."